So John White here with Luke 10, and I'm with my friend Paul Harrigan. Paul is in France. Paul and Laura Harrigan are in France, working with church planting there. And we just wanted to share with you a little bit of kind of the story of our relationship with Paul and Laura and myself and Luke 10. We first got to know each other about a year ago at the Luke 10 conference. And Paul, if you could share a little bit about, we really hadn't met before that. You didn't know a whole lot, and we talked on the phone, but didn't know a lot about Luke 10. What were some of the takeaways for you guys at the conference last year?
Well, we went there, as you know, at the recommendation of Tony and Felicity Dale, kind of looking for new ideas because we're actively involved in home groups and house churches in France. We try to help that movement along all we can. Through the result of our work, kind of in spite of us, about 50 or so home groups and house churches have started over the last 5 years or so. But we're always on the lookout, and it's very important to be on the lookout for other tools that can really help people here with that, innovative tools and things that we see God moving. And usually you kind of expect to make a few contacts and maybe see some things at a conference, but we both were with Laura really surprised about this whole thing of the concept of table churches. And then basically what you're doing is you're laying the foundations for kind of CO2s or churches of twos, and how there's some basic foundational things that can help a leader lead a home group or a house churches, whether that be as small as a group of a couple people or as big as a group of 10 people or so. And so the big thing was the takeout was this whole concept of what you guys call Church of 101, the class, and it summarizes the concept of and the importance of listening to God and listening to one another first, and then listening to God and developing those. And so those were huge takeouts. Is getting some new ideas and new thoughts, and then experimenting on them in France.
And so the next step, that was of course Labor Day weekend last year. Then you guys invited Tamla and myself to actually come to France in February of this year, 2014. And we did conferences in 3 different locations. Let's see, Paris, Lyon, is that right? And Nice?
Paris, Nice, and Avignon.
Avignon, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
And looking back on that, what were some of the things that you felt like you saw the Lord do in those conferences and the people that we met with? What were some of the ongoing fruit that came from that?
Well, we saw when we did the table churches and the conference, we then took those tools and tested them in our own home groups and house church and with our own leadership team in France, and I could see that I was getting a feeling that it probably would work. And so through the conferences, we did some of these things like table churches with the French people.
Yeah.
In every one of the cities, and I mean they're spread out all over one end of France to the other, and those 3 cities, and we saw people come to life with some of these basic concepts. The concept of listening to one another. A lot of times, you might try to avoid small talk and getting into that, but it's important to listen to one another. And it's important to listen to God. So anyways, we saw those basic principles work in the context of workshops, just like we saw at the conference and in our own home groups and house churches and leadership team. And then as a result, we decided that we really thought that God was saying, let's take this class called Church 101 and translate it. And so we got your agreement to be able to translate that and adapt it to the context here in France. And so, as a result of that, we put together a translation team, and so we have in order to help with the translation, we put 2 test teams of French people that use and tested the materials Church 101 in English. So the classes took place online, just like a regular thing would done. Of course, the materials are only available in French. Our discussion was in English, the materials are in English and our discussion was in French. But we were able to see the people test that, and it really seemed to work well.
Yeah.
And so now we're in the very beginning stages now of starting to take some of these documents and actually translate them. And I've done some video conferences and recorded some videos, like if you call it guerrilla videos and things like that.
Right. Kind of like what we're doing right now.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah. So it's so encouraging to see that these basic rhythms of attention, as we call them, are transferable from one culture to another. And in the table churches in the 3 conferences in France, to see people really connect with one another, often at a very deep level, and then to be able to connect with the Lord, it was very encouraging. Now you guys have had to do a little bit of modifying on sachet, I believe. Is that right? You've come up with a slightly different acronym.
Yeah, we came up with the word cachet, C-A-C-H-E-T, instead of S-A-S-H-E-T in English. And that seemed to be pretty good. And then some of the other people played with it some more and came up with the word emotic, E-M-O-T-I-C. And so we're thinking of all different options right now. We don't have anything definitive, but the same basic concepts are there. The importance of sharing one another's emotions.
Right. People in every culture have emotions. Amazing. We just need to find the right words to help them be able to give language to that. You also mentioned to me that you've seen a number of places where the what we call the tend to be virus from Luke chapter 10 verse 2 part B as a critical component of how we find people of peace and people who might lead house churches. You said that's you're seeing places in France where that's really beginning to catch hold as well. Talk about that for a minute.
We a year ago. Actually, just about a year ago from now, so in other words, in July 2000, anyway, last year, 2013, we went to a French National House Church Conference prior to going to the States and going to the Luke 10 House Church Conference. And several individuals bought books in An Army of Ordinary People in our Getting Started course. And there was an individual right after I arrived at the conference in France this year, just a few weeks ago, grabbed me and says, "I got to tell you about this." Actually, they asked me to make us kind of be one of the speakers, and so I gave a testimony about the importance of Luke 10:2b virus and how many years Jean-Pierre and myself prayed that together, and then how we still continue to pray it, and the fruit of that. And that was on the first night, as everybody heard that. And then somebody came up to me after and says, "I'm really glad you talked about this Luke 10:2b virus, because last year I read the book that you guys sold us or gave us, and I was I thought it was so neat that our whole leadership team, we have about 5 or 6 10:2b partners praying that prayer every week." So this individual took the concept and is modifying it so that not only he and one other people are praying it together, but there's like 5 groups of 2 praying Monday through Friday, and they've been doing this for like 6 months now, and he thinks it's fundamental and is just really encouraged. And I want to encourage you guys, because when I mention An Army of Ordinary People, the story is obviously about the 10:2b virus that was started through you, John, and your friend, I think it was Kenny Moore. Right?
That's right.
Yeah. Cool. I know his name in writing, and we were all very pleased to meet it. But the virus is spreading in France too. So
praise the Lord. Paul, would you mention just some of the hot spots, the places where you're beginning to see some house church activity occur in France? Could you mention some of the cities and maybe regions where you're kind of encouraged something's happening here, just so people will know?
Well, I came across 3 groups at this just recently. I was discovered. One was in the Alps, the French Alps. It was a couple, actually an English couple, who were heavily involved in house churches in England and moved to France in the Alps. And in their small little town, they started believe it or not, a house church in English, because they'd have guests that would come and they'd regularly meet with anyway. So they started that, and a year ago there was one house church in English, and so I wasn't thinking big deal, not that much to report on. This year I go back and I find out that there are 5 other ones that have been started in French.
Fantastic.
is going on. Basically, what happened was they found a person of peace, and that's linked into Luke 10.
Yeah.
This person of peace is a French person, very actively involved in a traditional church, and for something happened, and he had to leave this traditional church, and this other couple started really talking to him about how house churches could be an alternative that could really it's biblical. And he took that thing and ran with it, and big time. And so several were going.
Wonderful.
Another set of group of people has started a network of 6, or beginning to start a network of 6 in the Avignon area, south of Avignon. There's another group, another individual where a year ago there was one house church in a place between Lyon and Grenoble. One house church a year ago. Now there's 3 or 4, and so there's starting to be small groups of networks and starting, and there's I was really encouraged. I'm really encouraged by what's happening over here.
Right, and of course you're outside of Paris there.
Yep.
So there's some good house churches going on there. So that's wonderful. Well, Paul, we are delighted with a friendship between us and you guys, you and Laura, and what you're doing in France, and delighted that we can kind of talk and share and learn from each other and pray for each other. So thank you for taking time to share the story with us, and we'll keep the Luke 10 community apprised of what's going on there in France. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Merci. Thanks to everyone. Merci beaucoup, and to you, John, and to all Luke 10 Network. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Great. You bet.